Hey, welcome back.
Welcome to Sundays with Steadyworth.
Yes, we are excited for another week.
We're excited for tonight's topic.
Almost felt like I was having a little bit of echo. So just clearing that out, making sure we are on target. You can hear us good?
Yes, I can hear you great.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we're just going to hop on in. Today, we're going to be talking about faith and finance. When it comes to money, Christians are often on opposite ends of the spectrum. On one side, some over-spiritualize money. They connect dots that don't connect, avoid responsibilities, and put it all on God to fix. On the other side, some under-spiritualize money, and they treat money as if it has nothing to do with faith, relying on themselves and excluding God from their finances. So what's the right thing? The problem is both of these views distort what the Bible says about wealth, prosperity, and blessing. And here's the truth. How you connect your faith and your finances will determine how well you earn, manage, and grow and give what God has entrusted to you. Let's say that again. How you connect your faith to your finances will determine how well you earn, manage, and grow and give what God has entrusted to you. Now, we don't just come at this from our own opinion. I have a master's in divinity and practical theology. I'm also a certified financial planner, and I've spent a lot of time studying both ends. And so tonight, we're going to be talking about something that Laura and I have, during researching this, something we both discovered, which is that Jesus himself has given us a framework for understanding money that avoids both extremes of overemphasizing and over-spiritualizing and under-spiritualizing. So we want to figure out how can we come in right in the middle. And it all comes down to three things: money as a tool, a test, and a treasure. And how you answer which one of these money is to you in your life will really affect your finances more than you know. So we're going to hop right on into it.
Awesome. Great intro. I'm super excited. Like Gabe mentioned, he holds a master's of divinity in practical theology. So he could technically be a pastor and is in a lot of ways through the business. And we're eating popcorn over here because I have
made some amazing popcorn that we wanted to bring to the show. And I wanted to bring this as example because this is what my goal for you all is, to bring some popcorn to the show and just sit back, have your popcorn, have your tea, have your coffee. If it's not too late, maybe you're in Hawaii and it's early enough that you can still have coffee, or a different time zone.
That's right. Yeah. Afternoon.
Let's just hop in.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited about tonight's topic. I think this is a topic both you and I are super passionate about. Faith is a big part of our lives. How we make decisions, how we step out in faith, how we move about our life, make decisions. And so I'm super excited to dive into this. And I'm really excited about kind of what we discovered yesterday when we were doing the research for this episode. But want to just kick it off. You mentioned it in the intro a little bit. You said money is a tool, a test, and a treasure. And so I want to talk a little bit about that to start. We're going to dive deep into that throughout this episode. And we have a little bit, we're going to have a few slides just to teach a little bit as well. But do you see money as a tool, a test, or a treasure, and why?
I see it as all three. And I feel like it can function as all three really at all times in different areas of our life. And so we're all familiar with money being a tool, as in it's something that we use we work, we earn money. Then it's a tool that we go buy our groceries with, we buy homes with, or shelter, we buy transportation, things we need, communication, cell phones, or internet. And so we use it as a tool to help us live about our daily lives. It can be a test with, how well we're able to maybe give to others, or when God has asked us to do something, and that he might not even be asking us to give that money away. He could be asking us to do something in our own lives that requires, maybe we're not making as much money, or we're having to just invest into ourselves or into the calling that he has for us. So, it can be a test. God, anything that we value, God will always test us with something that we value to make sure that he comes before that thing that we value. And it can also be connected to a treasure in our life. Some people, money is their treasure. Others, they are using it as a tool to help make treasure, so it's like it can be used as a tool in your church or in a nonprofit organization you're working in, or it can be used as a tool to build treasures through those. It could be used as a treasure just right on the street, sowing into the life of a homeless person. And so, we'll dive into those more, but I feel like it can be used as all three at all times. Today, we at church, we go to Elevation, and Pastor Stephen Furtick, he was talking about lows and highs. And he was talking about, you can be in a low season and a high season, and we can see a season as separated by months, but really seasons can be separated in seconds. So it's like, you can have a low in one part of your life and a high in another part of your life. And I feel like the same thing with money is you can be using it as a tool in one part, and the next moment you can be in something with the test, and the next moment you can, trying to figure out, hey, your heart posture and how it is a treasure to you, or how you're sowing into a treasure. So these things you can hit all three of these in one day, just like how you can have lows and highs just in how you're feeling in one day.
Absolutely. I mean, I think this is something that we don't talk a ton about in church specifically. Like, there are some topics that are reserved for like e-groups or community groups, and even then it's not, we don't dive into it as deep as maybe we should, especially as Christian folk. But one thing that I was even thinking about as you were speaking, and this point that I'm making now is, when we were doing our research, Jesus actually talks a lot about money in the Bible. And we were even saying, like, if we go too deep too soon, we could end up in a super theological discussion about all the different things that Jesus said about money and how we may want to use it to make decisions, further our goals, but more importantly, further the goals of the kingdom. And ultimately, that's what we're going to talk about today. So super excited about that. I think as we were preparing for this and talking through this, I was even thinking about, some of the people in the Bible who God equipped with resources to actually fulfill their calling and fill their purpose. And I feel like in a lot of ways, it's been used throughout the scriptures and different people. Paul, he talks about what he'll be content with nothing or everything, right? As long as, and he gets his strength through the Lord. So I think it's a cool little framework that we've kind of pulled together, and I'm excited to kind of dive into it a little bit.
Definitely.
Cool. So I'm going to just pop up some slides here and get us a little bit bigger so we can see. So what does the Bible really say about money? So this is Faith and Finance Explained here. We're just going to talk a little bit. We wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of what we talked about in the beginning of the intro around this idea of over-spiritualizing versus under-spiritualizing money in particular. So I'm sure you've experienced this on multiple spectrums, whether it's you yourself or you've encountered someone like this, and hopefully you can see the slides. I know it's a little bit small, but kind of you fall somewhere on this spectrum where over-spiritualize, meaning like everything is really spiritual, and it kind of looks like your mindset is a little bit more of like, God's going to take care of it. I don't need a plan. I don't need to save. I don't need a budget. God is going to work it out, right? And then some of the behaviors that go along with that mindset: waits passively for provision, so doesn't necessarily put in the work to get provision. And this would be something we were talking about. It's like you're working a 9-to-5, but you're mismanaging your money and still expecting God to put a check in your mailbox. And sometimes that happens, right? But not always. And so kind of waiting passively for provision, faith without works. So it's kind of said in a different way, and avoids responsibility or taking responsibility for the finances that the Lord has already given you, right? And so the outcomes of this can be kind of money chaos, a false sense of security, and irresponsible financial habits. So you're not necessarily stewarding what you have in a way that's representative of what you need, right? So that's kind of what over-spiritualization can look like. And then just talking a little bit about under-spiritualization. Is there anything you want to mention on over-spiritualization before I fast forward?
No, keep going.
Sounds good. Okay, cool. So this next one, under-spiritualized, and I feel like for me personally, if I'm just going to out myself, I feel like this is me, and I'm learning to get a little bit more in the middle with my finances, because I felt like my financial life and my spiritual life were separate. Like they were two different things. And so, God would help me in some areas, but in terms of my financial life, it was up to me. It was my responsibility. And it was, how I would describe it here in these behaviors is pursues money without prayer. So like kind of just goes after the next big thing, works without faith. So it's like fully dependent on you to provide, to get your finances in order, to pay your bills, to do all that, and over responsibility for provision. So this can lead to self-reliance, anxiety, misplaced identity in wealth, or the lack of it. And so I think, it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just you don't want to be in the extremes of either of these. But we found that in the church, it can kind of be either or. And so we wanted to kind of build this framework or share this framework so that you can kind of merge the two and see and find yourself a little bit more in the middle of that spectrum. Anything else?
I think, I really like this framework. And it's interesting. I feel like looking at the spectrum, especially growing up in the church, I have been on both sides of the spectrum. There's been times where, growing up, I remember one time, you getting a prophetic word that I'd be well off financially. And so I'm like, great, then I don't need to worry about money. So it's like, I can just do whatever I want. And then I ended up finding myself into like a massive amount of debt. And so, and so this is where you can like overly spiritualize something. So it's like, oh, well, if this and this is going to happen, then let me deduct that I can do this. And it's like, saying one thing, if God's saying one thing, like, hey, he's going to bless you with finances, he's not saying that you can go spend everything you want. So it's like, we can read into things and then, get ourselves into trouble. It also makes me think of a time back when we were living in Miami, and my mom came to visit us, and she and I were out at breakfast, and we were talking about finances and saving for retirement and different things. And she was saying, she's like, when I was young in church, we would go to church every Sunday, and then we'd have, I think it was like Wednesday service or Friday service, and they would be talking about Jesus is coming back. She's like, he's coming back sooner than what you think. Like that was the topic all the time. It's like, he's coming back. He might be coming back next week. Like, and they're constantly talking about Jesus' return. And so in her mind, she's like, well, if Jesus is returning, I don't need to save for retirement. Like he's going to be coming before I'm 35. She goes, but then at some point when I got into my mid-30s, I'm like, maybe it's going to be a while before the Lord turns, and maybe I need to start putting some money into this 401k. And
right.
So, and I mean, true story. This is what she told me. And thankfully she did, because she is going to be retiring in the next year or so. And so good thing that she started working on that. And so I think that it's really important to, just really get clear on what is over-spiritualizing, what is under-spiritualizing, and, and just how can you properly connect the two, and live a life that you're excited about?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are watching this, just drop where you feel like you might land on the spectrum. Of course, there's no hard numbers here, but what's your tendency? I mean, I still struggle with under-spiritualizing it. I still get on that pull, and my mindset can get the best of me on that. So
I think
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to just add this in. I wasn't sure what part I wanted to add it in, but I figured why not add it in right now, and then I can always re-say it. But we were, I believe it was also Pastor Stephen Furtick. I believe it was a sermon from last year. And he said, pray like it depends on God and work like it depends on you. And so I think that was from the sermon, dig until God does, or something like that. So, the point being is that that's something that is like, hey, you're doing both. I mean, unless God tells you just pray and put it in my hands and believe that I'm going to do it. And if he says that, every time God speaks, he always confirms his word. And so, you're going to get confirmation from someone or from something else. And talking about how to hear God's voice, that's a whole nother series in itself. I don't even know that Sundays at Steadyworth could even do that justice.
Right.
For getting into that. But, pray, if you're wondering what to do, pray like it depends on God and work like it depends on you. So put that faith and that work together.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that'll look like in a second here, but just want to dive into this first one, money as a tool. Okay. So bear with me here. I just want to show you that money, a lot of people, I think, especially in the church, there's a lot of different beliefs around this, right? So, one common one is money is the root of all evil, of course. And it's really talking about your heart posture, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. But money by itself is actually neutral. It's not good or bad. It's like a hammer. It can build something up or it can destroy something depending on how it's used. So money itself is neutral. An over-spiritualized distortion of this truth is I don't need to think about budgets or savings. God will provide, right? Which in some cases that may be true. And you want to make sure that you're seeking the Lord and you're praying and you're reading your word and you're understanding what that actually means in your life. And then the under-spiritualized version, which I think I hear more so than the over-spiritualized personally. Like you could hear it when you talk to people, especially when you talk about tithing or giving away money to the church or, paying your bills and stuff. It's like money is mine. I earned it and I decide how it's used. When really it's been a gift given to you by the Lord that you are stewards. We're technically stewards of the money that we're given, whether it's through a job, through an inheritance, through winning the lottery, through investing, whatever it is. The Lord has given us the ability to gain wealth. And so really the balance or the application of this is seeing money more as a resource entrusted to you by God to provide, to give, to build his kingdom. So budgeting, saving, investing, and giving are all ways in which you use that tool really well. So that would just be like a slight way to see that a different and in a truth. Would you add anything here? Or what are your thoughts?
I was going to say, thinking of this as money as a tool and that nothing is really ours came really, of course, I've always known that, but it really became alive to me back when we were living in Miami and we would go on walks on the beach. And there was this one particular piece of the beach we walk on called Golden Beach. And I wish we had a picture that we could flash up right now. And there was, so when you're walking down the beach, it's the only area in Miami where homes are directly on the beach. And so you're walking and basically you're 50 yards, you're walking down the shoreline and 50 yards to your right on your right's the water and 50 yards to your left is people's back doors. And I just remember seeing this one house that was on the market for $100 million. It was a fixer upper. The person had, that's it. 355, maybe flip that camera, your thing this way. Oh. So, yeah. Oh. And so, but it just made me think, I'm like, man, this person I looked up the history of this house. This person that bought this land, built the house. They lived there for like 20 something years and they passed away. And now their family's trying to sell the house. And so the point is that it's literally the person was just stewarding that land, even though they owned it. Now it's going to be sold. It's going to someone else's. And then that person is going to steward the land until the next person comes. And so it just really just reinforced to me. It's like, wow, nothing is really yours.
Right.
And you only have it for just such a short time. And then it moves on to the next person.
It moves on. Yeah, that's a great example. I never thought about it that way either. And that was a house we would walk by regularly and dream up big dreams. And we still do a lot of times. But money is a tool, right? And so it's a resource for you to further God's kingdom. And it's a way in which you can live your life and be excited, right?
Absolutely. And
so here are just a couple of scriptures. Hopefully you can see this okay. It's not that clear now that I'm seeing it here, but 2 Corinthians 9:10 through 11. And it says, now he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will also supply and increase your store of seed and will enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. So really talking about the Lord supplying. You will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion. And through us, your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. So this is just kind of like stamping that, the Lord is our provider and he is going to enrich you in every single way so that you can be generous on every occasion. So that's just like such a great reminder, even for me as I read that out loud. And then Proverbs 3:9 through 10, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops, and then your barns will filled to overflowing, and vats will brim over with new wine. So just talking again about when you're thinking about this in terms of the tool, and that's something that the Lord is giving you, it's going to be in abundance, not scarcity, right? And so I think we talk about that too a little bit, like poverty mindset is not a Christian belief, right? The Lord speaks over and over and over again in his word that when we put our trust in him and when we steward the resources that he gives us, our barns will be filled to overflowing and our vats will be brim over with new wine. And then this one is one of my favorite scriptures of all time. I've been meditating on Deuteronomy 8 forever. But it says, remember that the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth. So it confirms his covenant, which he swore to your ancestors as it is today. And so I think, you've been given talents, skills, money, resources. How can you obviously attribute or give credit where credit is due, but also to remember that those things were given to you by God as well to produce wealth, and he gives you the power to do so.
Amen.
Anything else here?
No, I think you hit it, but I mean, yeah, no, it's great.
Cool. So the next thing is money as a test. So I was telling Gabe, as we were talking about this earlier today, he was like, I've never really thought about money as a test. And I'm like, I feel like the last 3 years of my life has been money as a test.
Well, I feel like I've thought about it as a test, but I just think of it, I thought about it in limited capacities as a test. Like, if you're not tempted to steal money, then maybe it's not really a test for you.
Right.
Or if you're generous and you're willing to give money away, then, that's another test. But then there's other areas that we started digging into. I was like, okay, well, but then there's more than just stealing and giving that can be part of money being a test.
Yeah. And I think you said something like, what if, you need to use the money to follow the call of God or to be obedient to what he says or something along those lines, which I was like, I feel like that's been the last 2 years of our lives, investing into what we feel like God has called us to do. And that has been something, if I'm just being 100% transparent, has been very difficult for me as an under-spiritualizer of money and feeling like I've spent a lot of time earning and growing my career and doing all these things. It was something that was very hard for me to really understand. And the Lord has taught me so much about this in the last few years. Pursuing Steadyworth with you, but also just getting laid off and really seeing how money has shaped me in a lot of ways growing up. And so the truth about this really is, how we handle money actually reveals our heart and it tests our priorities, character, and trust in God. And for me personally, first to admit that when things didn't necessarily go the way that we had planned originally or lost the job and different things have come up, it revealed what my trust was in. And I am not, I am a little bit ashamed to say this, but I feel like a lot of the last couple of years, I realized that my trust was more in money than in God. And he's really corrected me and shown me that he's the provider. He's what we put our trust in. And so I think even back to all of what we talk about all the time, being honest about yourself, being honest about where you're at. And so again, that's just a little bit of my own story on this one, because I do feel like God uses it as a test. But an over-spiritualized distortion, if I just pray, God will overlook bad financial habits, right? So this is God is a root cause God. He's always going to look for the root cause. He's always going to look for that thing that like distorts your view of him or distorts your view of himself. And so, he's going to hold you accountable. That's the kind of person he is, with the most grace and love and mercy as possible. Add that in there. But he will hold you accountable. He will convict you, right? And so the under-spiritualized distortion, money has nothing to do with my faith. It's separate from my walk with God, right? And that's a really extreme version. You may not resonate with that specifically, but how you use money in your day-to-day life will tell you what you really believe. And so every dollar, the balance or the application is every dollar is a discipleship test. Like, are we faithful in the little? Are we generous? Do we trust God, or do we hoard in fear? Passing the test means aligning your spending, giving, and saving with biblical values in service of God's goals for this present time and the one to come.
Yes.
Any thoughts here?
Yeah, no, I think that, like I said, God's kind of constantly be testing us, whether it's money or something else, anything that in our heart that we could put above him. And it's easy to put, I feel like money can be the easiest thing, but it could also be a job. It can be a child,
a person,
it could be a relationship, a person, anything, a thing you own, a car. But God's always going to be testing us with things. And we've seen that in the Bible. We saw with Abraham, him testing Abraham about his son Isaac, testing him about the promise that he has for him, that he's spoken over him. Will Abraham trust God in all things? And so, there's always a possibility of a test coming up, or we will be presented with tests. Jesus was tested.
That's right.
And so, he was tempted, which is, part of a test. And so, but he passed. And so it's like, we will always be tested, tempted to do things that maybe that aren't our best reflection of ourselves and who God has called us to be. And so, I feel like, the one with the money, it resonates so real because it's earning money is such a big part of our lives. If you work a regular full-time job, even if it's just regular is 40 hours a week. So you're spending 40 hours of your week earning money. And so it's like, this is where you're spending most of your time at. So it's not like, just something that you got for doing just a couple hours and you're like, whatever, this is a big part of our lives. So yeah, I feel like it comes up constantly that this can be a big test as well.
Yeah. And it just makes me think of that scripture. We don't have it on here, but it's one of my favorites, Romans 12:2 or 12:1 and 2. And it talks about how, we're like a holy and living sacrifice to the Lord. So everything that we do is for him. And so, whether that's working 40 hours a week, working 2 hours a week, all of that stuff kind of goes back to being a living sacrifice that's holy, pleasing, and perfect to the Lord. So I think that's roughly what the scripture says, but we're going to pop into a few more scriptures here.
I was going to just say, and under-spiritualizing, when it says money has nothing to do with my faith, it's separate from my walk with God. I forget who I heard say this, but they were just like, I'm not a physical being having a spiritual experience. I'm a spiritual being having a physical experience here on earth. And so with that thought, it's like, if we believe that, we're just here for a short time, our eternal reward is in heaven, and we are spiritual beings having a physical experience here on earth. Everything we do is connected.
Yeah.
Everything we do here on life is connected. Nothing is separate from who we are as that spiritual being.
Yeah. I heard someone say that the other day, and this was hard for me to wrap my brain around because I am a little bit more physical. Like I just touch and feel and see, but it was like the spiritual realm is actually more real than the physical one. And so it's like, how can you tap into that mindset and understand kind of like the laws of heaven, so to speak? And how can you kind of pull that into your daily experience with, your job or going to work or in relationships? So money is going to reveal your heart, right? So it's going to say what's already in there, and it's not good or bad. It's just the Lord doesn't want your heart to be distorted or broken or messed up. And so sometimes, a lot of times, he's going to use money to reveal that, and he'll use other things as well. But this is one of the things. So a couple of scriptures, Luke 16:10 is a part of a bigger parable that Jesus speaks about, which I did a whole deep dive on this, which I will not go into because we are not in a theology class, but it basically kind of leads to this principle, like whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches, right? And I think true riches, he's talking about the things of heaven. And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? And so it's just really putting that nail in the stewardship piece, but also that no little amount of money or a lot of money is going to change who you are as a person. It's just going to exemplify who you already are. And then also the parable of the bags of gold. So if you've never heard of this, this is where a man, this is also a parable that Jesus talks about in the New Testament, where, he gives servants an allotment of wealth, and they each get a different allotment, and they go and according to his abilities, they go sow it, invest it, work and do something, and they end up doubling what they've received, except for the last person who was scared of the giver and ended up just going and burying the bag of gold and doing nothing with it, which is very frowned upon. So it's like, how can you take what you've been given, use your gifts, multiply and duplicate? And so anything else on those that you'd want to touch on?
I think we got them.
Okay, cool. And last but not least for this one, it's like money as a treasure, right? And so when money points to actually what we value, where our treasure goes, our heart follows. And so this is something we talk about all the time with our clients and our workshops. If you want to know what's important to you, look at your calendar and look at your bank statements, because that will tell you what you value. You may say that you value family, but you spend all your time at work, right? You may say that you value, what's a good example of something like in a bank for the bank statements? Like you value healthy living, but all you eat is fast food.
Yeah.
Right. So that'll tell you kind of where your values are. Right. And so an over-spiritualized distortion of this, I should avoid money altogether. Wealth is evil, which is not true. And then the under-spiritualized distortion is wealth is the ultimate treasure. It defines success, right? And so, or God's favor, or could lean on prosperity gospel a little bit as well. And so the balance or the application of this is money, again, itself isn't wrong, but it should be invested in eternal things, generosity, kingdom work, people. The question isn't, should I have money, but what kind of treasure am I storing up, and who does it serve? So that's kind of like the treasure piece. It's, what does it say? Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, right? Versus treasures on earth.
I think you hit this right on.
Okay. Any other things you want to share on this one?
No, I think, it makes me think about the exercise, and I don't know if you wanted to talk about this in another part of this, but, it made me think about the exercise that we're running a client through, or that we run clients through when we do our goals. And one of them is, it's meaningful. It's, what is it? It's interests. And then
we talk about,
I'm trying to think of the right order.
Yeah.
I know one of them is meaningful memories. The first one is interest, and then
what brings you joy or inspiration?
Right. What brings you joy or inspiration? I was trying to come up with the right word, and then meaningful memories. And basically we're working on tying the two together, seeing what reoccurring themes are happening between the two. And at one point we were running a client through it, and they were just taking some time to deep think on it. And I was like, while they're taking some time to deep think on it, I'm going to take some time to just think on think on it too, just even deeper for myself, just because, I don't want to interrupt them or rush them. And so I'm jotting down some thoughts, and I feel like everything I wrote down that was a meaningful memory to me was always connected to time I had spent with someone else or with other people. None of my meaningful memories were connected to purchases that I've made. It wasn't made towards buying a nice clothes or jewelry or cars
Yeah.
or anything. If any meaningful memories that I had that were connected to purchases were connected to purchases that I actually made for other people, and that I was able to bless them with something. And so, thinking about money as a treasure is really, how can you use that treasure to really deploy and impact other people is something that I think. And I think, even with Laura and I's goals as a couple, one of our big goals is that we really like hosting people at our home, and just, cooking and making just them feel welcome and loved on. And so, that's one way that, we even use money as a treasure to be a blessing to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's something that brings us joy, and we love doing it. Like, we love giving, and we love being tired from it. Like, we hosted his uncle and aunt a few weekends ago, and we threw down all weekend. We were cooking breakfast, dinner. I mean, we got all the best stuff from the grocery store, from this farm that we go to. And it seriously was such a fun weekend to just bless someone with the best of the best, or things that we felt like were the best of the best, and just make people feel loved on. And so that's just one way, we can use money to bless people, and to really to people, and serve people. So
And I feel like,
this
and
go
I feel
ahead.
like that's an example of putting money into eternal things, generosity, kingdom work, people. Because it would be hard to be at our house for that many days and the Lord not come up. So obviously, we're having times to read the Bible,
Yeah,
praying, all kinds of stuff. And so,
that's right.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's like, we all of it was food related, so it's like that stuff doesn't last forever. So it's like, okay, you could buy a great filet mignon and leave it in the refrigerator and never cook it and never eat it, and it would be just a waste of money, even though it was really expensive, right? But like, there's something about making it and sharing it with people and having them enjoy it that just brings us both a lot of joy. But it talks about, like, in the scripture, Matthew 6:19-21, it says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy, right? So there's no point in keeping the filet mignon, this expensive filet mignon, in the refrigerator where it's going to mold, rot, and get bad, or where thieves break in and steal.
right.
But store up for yourself treasures in heaven, where moth and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so I think that's just, even with the last one, is like, it's going to reveal your character, it's going to reveal your heart, and then, where your treasure is, your heart will be also. And so you don't necessarily want it to be in money itself, but what money can do, or how it can serve somebody. Right. And then I think the next one here is 1 Timothy 6:17-19. So command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Which I read this. This wasn't originally in our scriptures that we researched, but when I read this, I was like, man, this is so good, and such a good reminder of, like, it says God who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment, right? So, like, life isn't necessary. It's like back to what Pastor Stephen was saying this morning. It's like you could be in a high and then in a low, but it's like God's going to provide for our enjoyment. Like, he wants to bless us. And so be rich in good deeds, be generous and willing to share.
Yes.
Even your popcorn, which I'm still learning to do, because I am a bad sharer.
Yes. And I had plenty of Laura's popcorn out of her own bowl this evening before we hopped
I
on
had
this
to
call.
make a double batch, but the Lord provides. So we're here with
That's right.
more. We're in abundance of popcorn over here.
Yes.
So this is just like the framework as a whole, right? So money as a tool, money as a test, money as a treasure. And we just want you to think about money in this way, or through these lenses or through these perspectives versus maybe what you've just heard or what you've grown up on or what you've, and maybe you've got a really healthy view of it and you're right smack dab in the middle. You don't over spiritualize it. You don't under spiritualize it, but we can, I think, veer depending on the situation we're in, depending on the circumstance we're in. We're not always, smack dab in the middle. In terms of, I was just thinking one of these books that I'm reading was talking about rehearsing experiences in your mind that where God provided. And one that I keep thinking of is when I first moved to the Bay Area. I was 23 years old. So I had I feel like I had very little experience, but I remember everyone being like, where are you going to live? Do you have anywhere to live? Like, you're moving up there, you're starting this job, like, where are you going to live? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know. And people were like, you don't know, like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know, but I just had like a sense, like I had a deep sense in my spirit that I did not have to worry about it, that the Lord was going to provide somewhere for me to live and that it was going to work out. And I didn't have to like think too hard about it or work too hard about it, or strive for it. And I moved up to the Bay Area, started my job on a Monday, had an apartment by Friday. And it was like the best living situation ever. So it was like, there are things where it's like the Lord just will provide for you. And there isn't that much striving. And then there is some stuff that you have to pray into, work for, sacrifice time, money, obedience to really pursue that thing. And I think, God will show you how it's used as a tool. He'll show you how it's going to test you and reveal your heart, and he'll show you how you can direct it towards eternal things. And so money is a tool to manage, a test that reveals your heart, and a treasure that shows you what you truly worship. And so you want to manage it wisely, you want to manage it wisely. Any other thoughts here on the framework?
Yeah. No, I love the framework that, and hopefully this is helpful. And I was just thinking how, like, some situations in our life and God will just open up the door and it happen quickly and immediately. And I feel like maybe even sometimes younger in life that can happen because he wants, he's encouraging you. Whereas as you're growing closer to him and growing in your journey continues, he can stretch out the time sometimes of how long it takes for him to maybe give you the response that you're looking for, but he's also growing your dependence upon him. And so, the tests, can be the same, but look different.
Yeah.
And so, but, because it ups the level.
Yeah.
And so,
absolutely.
just like the tools can be the same, but they can look different because they up a level as your provisions up a level. The treasures can be the same, but look different, as your provisions change, because, even the tools and resources that I have now are a lot different than I had when I was working my high school job at Children's Fairyland.
Yeah,
So even the treasures and the tests, they were all different than they are in this season now. And so, just thinking of like, so just wanted to say that to encourage you that it's like, hey, every season you're in, even that season can just even be in life, just at age range or where you're at, whether you're at this job, starting a business, married, single, unemployed, whatever it may be, things can look different. But, at the end of the day, God's constantly trying to draw us closer to him. He's, it is his goal for, us to, live a life that we're excited about, but that doesn't mean that hardship doesn't come. I think, hardship and hard times are just part of life.
Yeah.
And so, and they come whether we have money or not.
Yeah. And it's just, even as you're speaking, it makes me think of the scripture where it says, Jesus, I have come to bring life and bring it to the full. Right. And so, if you're feeling discouraged around money, if you're feeling discouraged around your situation or your circumstances, I think there is a really healthy balance between prayer or like faith and works, right? Like putting the faith in that, God is going to provide. I mean, we've seen him provide over and over again, even if it doesn't look the way that you think it's going to look. God is going to provide, and he's going to test your heart. And that's part of growing in relationship with him, which is our ultimate purpose and our ultimate goal, is to be close to him, because he loves us. He loves you. And he wants to be, he wants to be your provider. He wants to be your protector. He wants to be, the person that you can trust and rely on. Right. And I think we may come up with an idea of what that should look like in our heads, but oftentimes, especially as we grow in our relationship with him, oftentimes it doesn't look that way. We were just talking about this the other day. We have a specific situation where we were like, we are in the breakthrough. Like we were looking for a different kind of breakthrough, but it's like, now that we're looking at it like this, it's like, we actually are in the breakthrough. Like, this is crazy. And so make sure that you're just paying attention to, and seeking the Lord in that. It says, seek first the kingdom and all else will be added to you, which I think is the ultimate scripture, right? If we're pursuing him, pursuing his goals, pursuing his purpose for our lives, we're going to get there, and we're going to experience life and life to the full. So that's my little soapbox.
Just, once again, pray like it depends on God, work like it depends on you.
Absolutely. And then this is just like kind of our last slide for the night around just bridging the extremes, right? So if you're in a place where you're maybe over-spiritualizing something, just acknowledge the practical, right? Like budget, savings, planning, investing. Those are always good things to do. Whether, regardless of what situation you're in, right? And then to avoid under-spiritualizing, acknowledging that there's a spiritual aspect to money as well. And it's revealing your heart posture and eternal purpose. And so those are just kind of like the guard, like how you can kind of bridge the gap between the two. And it's a work in progress. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, but I can't promise that we'll have answers for you. Your best bet is probably reaching out to the Lord, calling him on that good old prayer line.
That's right.
24/7 access, and just ask the Holy Spirit to speak to you. That's the best advice I've ever gotten, is like, silence my voice, silence the voice of the enemy, and Holy Spirit, speak. What do you want me to know? What do you want me to do? That comes from Jamie Winship, Fearless Living, which is a great book. Not a money book at all, but it's a good book.
Yes.
So those are kind of the slides that we have for today. So just kind of recapping, or kind of closing us out. How can faith guide the way we earn, save, give, and spend?
Multiple ways. And so when I think of earning, I would say, for me, when I was looking to go into the work world at 18, of course, and, I'm looking to go to college, I was like praying, I'm like, Lord, what do you want me to do with my life? And so I felt like faith guided the way that he wanted me to earn. And so initially, actually, I thought, okay, maybe I want to work. And let me be clear here, when you're discerning, hearing the voice of God, you're going through a whole bunch of things. So I was like, well, maybe, I didn't feel like he said, hey, Lord, Gabe, I want you to do this specifically. And so, initially I went, but I knew he wanted me to go to school, and I felt like I wanted to major in pastoral studies. So initially I went to school and was a pastoral studies major. And so that was what my undergrad was in. And then when I was out of school, when I graduated, or right before graduation, I thought, oh, maybe I want to continue on my education studies. So then that's when I went to start working on my master's in divinity and practical theology. Also did a master's in organizational leadership. Not telling you all this to give you all my degrees and stuff, but I'm just telling you the process of, how faith actually influenced me for earning. And then as I got into the workforce, I'm like, hey, I feel like my faith influenced my education, but I don't know that I really want to work in nonprofit. And I don't really feel like I'm connected to this way. And so I started doing some more reflection, introspection, talking to mentors. And I was like, you know what? I really got clear that I want to work in finance.
Yeah.
And then, but talking about over-spiritualizing and under-spiritualizing, I went to the opposite end of the spectrum where I just under-spiritualized. And I'm like, these two aren't connected. But after I started working in finance, then I'm like, you know what? my faith and finance is connected. So it's like,
Yeah.
the things that I learned going through pastoral studies, going through a master's of divinity and practical theology is actually connected to the same things that I'm learning as a CFP, and how I deploy, my business, our business, Steadyworth, and financial education is also, educating people about faith, is not shoving Christianity down their throats. But for somebody who asks me about, how do I come up with some of this stuff? I'm like, honestly, I'm praying about it.
Yeah.
If you're, if they really want to know, it's like, hey, honestly, I'm praying about how we're coming to these different decisions, or I'm praying through these different investment ideas, or I'm praying through, like, if you've seen at Steadyworth, we have a 1-page financial planning framework that I was able to create. I prayed about that. Like, that was like a framework that God downloaded in my head. I just wasn't, artistically like, oh, we're just going to do it like this. No, I had a couple different ideas, and I literally spent time praying over them and just said, Lord, lead me. How can I get clear in this? And that's what happened. So that's one way that I would say that was the first part of the question is,
how can faith guide the way we earn, save, give?
So faith, I'm constantly praying over what it was in career, because I also was praying about, it's like, what I want to go back to, when I was thinking about before I fully went into finance, I was like, would I want to go into law school? Would I want to go into marketing? Would I want to go into this, that? I literally was looking through a bunch of different career paths and just praying and asking God to give me a peace and lead me a guide. I mean, I finally remember when I settled on finance, going into finance. And I still didn't understand that Steadyworth was going to be where we were going, or where I was going. I just felt a peace. There was just a peace in my heart. I'm like, okay, this is it. I felt a peace. And keep in mind, this is a big 180 move for somebody who's working at a nonprofit, with my educational background, to be like, now I'm going into, wealth management, basically.
Right.
And so, but God was with me along the way, and he opened up the doors for me to get the jobs I needed to get at the different firms, to get the certifications I needed to get at the different things. And so, and for me to get where I'm at, and I can be here today sharing this story. So that's how I would say is, seeking the Lord can help you with your earning. What's the second part of it?
Saving.
The next thing, as you can seek God again and figure out, hey, how is it that you want me to allocate my resources? I can tell you that God, this isn't a prosperity gospel. He would like for you to be in the best financial position that you can be in, given the resources that he's entrusted to you. And that's not, so I'm saying, with the resources that he's already entrusted to you,
that's right.
The Lord does not want you spending any more than you make. Ask him. Ask him. I've already asked him, and I've already done it before. And he's like, Gabe, I did not tell you to live above your means. And he's, so God does not want you living above your means. And
well, it's almost like it's like he's providing something for you. And so living above your means, almost to a certain extent, is like, well, I don't have everything that I need. And it's like, I remember someone saying at one point, it was like, if you needed it, you would have it.
Right.
In relation to the Lord specifically giving you something. And I was like, I say that to myself all the time now.
Here.
Oh, you have a guest who's
Gunnar wanted to say hi to Sunday. You want to say hi to the camera? He needs to go.
Let's see if we can get him on the big. Yes. There he is. He likes to play at this hour, and he specifically likes to play with Gabe at this hour. So
he said, hey, are you guys done yet? I hear you in here talking, but I wanted you to come talk to me.
He's probably ready to eat.
So that was, yes. So how to allocate your resources, your savings, and what was the last part of that?
Well, it was give and spend. And so I think the big, you want to put him out in the other room.
Sure.
I think the big thing that I'm hearing you say.
I'll let you touch on the spend.
Yeah. Well, the big thing that I'm hearing you say is like, pray first. And I think, if you don't know how to pray, or you don't pray regularly, I can get how that can feel a little bit frustrating. But, the more you're in your word, the more you can understand. And it's like, I've heard someone explain hearing from the Lord this way, and I'm not going to go deep into this at all. But, a lot of times that Gabe has said, okay, the Lord downloaded this to me. He was like, this wouldn't be something that I would have created myself, or I would have thought of myself. So there's that distinction. But then I also think the more that you're in relationship with someone or something, right? I could tell you, if I go to Gabe and ask him a question about something, most of the time, I know how he's going to respond because I know him. I know what he'll say to me, right? And it's because I've known him for a while. I mean, he's not the longest relationship that I've ever had, but it's like if I go to my mom, I know exactly what she's going to say to me. I know how she's going to respond to certain topics and what she's going to say about certain things. And the same is true with the Lord. Once you start to read his word and understand his personality, understand his character, understand how he speaks. We're reading this book right now called Victorious Emotions. It's an amazing book. It's like transforming my life, but it says the Lord always leads us into triumph. So if your thoughts aren't leading you into triumph, it's probably not the Lord leading you. So you want to determine kind of you want to be able to discern that from the fruits of the Spirit. And so peace, patience, so forth and so forth. I should know all of them, but I don't. So I'm saying all of that to recap what you were saying in terms of how faith can guide how you save, spend, earn, and give, right? Yes. You want to talk to him first and feel like you have some sort of direction from him, whether that's a specific word, an impression, a confirmation of some sort. But go to him first because It's better. It's better. It's so much better. And it's faster. So I think you touched on spend, right? Don't spend more than you make, basically. Key takeaway. Yes. Okay, so what's the difference between ownership and stewardship in God's eyes?
Well, everything that we have, we're here to steward it. Just like I mentioned in the example of the home that we saw on Golden Beach, the people who own it are really just stewarding that land for a while. Nobody owns anything. Yeah. And so, I mean, before we were here, somebody else had it. And, and after we're here, somebody else is going to have it. Yeah. And so, and I feel like when we understand that we're here when we understand that we are stewards of something, it allows us to take care of that thing, but to not give it a place in our lives or in our hearts that it shouldn't have, because we know we're just taking care of it. We're just stewarding it. It's not really ours.
Yeah. Okay. And ownership, I own it, basically. Yeah. Therefore, it's mine.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like if we look at everything that we have as stewardship that is not ours, we keep it in its rightful place.
Yeah.
That's it's just something that we have for a while.
Yeah. And I feel like when you're stewarding something, it's easier to let go of. Yeah. Right. Like, I think when you feel like you own something, it's really hard to let go of something. I remember hearing a podcast where it was like, ask God if he wants you to have the job before you ask what the salary is.
That's right. And I remember
see what he says.
Yeah. And I asked, I remember a youth pastor always saying that, you never see a Brinks truck following a hearse. It's like, when it's done, is done, like, no,
you can't take it with you.
Yeah, you can't take that with you. And then another one, I don't know if she said this or if my dad said this story, is like, there's a guy who was very well off and he told his wife he needed to be buried with all of his money because he was going to need it with where he was going. So he was like, I need, I understand that things are going to be rough for you, but I need you to bury me with all of my money. And so, he passed away. The day for the funeral came, and then one of his family members said, I remember blank saying he needed to be buried with all of his money. Did you put all of his money in there? She said, absolutely. And she said, so you buried him with all his money? She goes, yes, I wrote him a check.
Stop.
That is
hilarious.
You can cash it when he gets there. So
that is hilarious. Wow, smart lady.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was made up or a joke or whatever.
It sounds like a joke to me.
But the point is that, we're just stewarding this stuff.
And I think we have a propensity to do what we want to do versus what God wants to do.
Right.
And if we feel like we own our money or we own the stuff that we have, we're less likely to let it go. 1. 2, we're also less likely to listen to what God asked us to do, because sometimes he does ask you to let it go or to give all of it. And the question is will you do it? right? And it says, if you love me, you'll follow my commands. And of course, he's talking about specific commands in the Bible, but I also think that he can have specific things that he wants you to do. And if you're holding too tightly to the things of this world, you're missing out on the things that can happen in well, number one, you're missing out on being in relationship with Lord and demonstrating your love for him, but also who knows, what eternal ramifications that will have. And that sounds bad, but of course, grace and mercy and love are always part of God's plan. So but he does take his work seriously. Like God takes his work seriously. He takes his kingdom seriously, and he wants to work through us because he loves us. And I think that's always so cool. So anyways, I will get off my soapbox for that one. We're running out of time here. We're at 7:00 on the dot here. How do we balance contentment with ambition, being grateful while still striving?
I think it depends on just, once again, I feel like there's different levels of what people want to accomplish. And, what I mean by that, I mean earning, I mean accumulation, and all kinds of things like that. Earning, there's different levels. Like there's some people who just have like a regular job, and I mean, like they don't make a lot, they don't make a little, and they're just like, hey, I don't need another thing in life to change. I don't need to make any more. I don't need any more stuff. I'm just totally fine with this. And there's some people who are like, hey, I would like to ascend the ranks. I'd like to be the highest earning, or in the top, 10, 20% of the highest earning in the career path that I do. I'd like to have more stuff. And so, I think that as long as you're doing it for it, when we talk about when we're talking about balancing contentment with striving, or what was the other word?
Contentment with ambition.
With ambition, I think when you're being ambitious, but you have the right heart posture in mind. And so it's like, are you trying to accumulate more because money is your God? Or are you trying to accumulate more so that you can show off, or so that you can flex,
prove yourself,
or prove yourself, even if it's proving yourself to yourself? Or are you growing in career and wealth because that is what God has called you to do? And so, the one thing I could say in the Bible, God's called us all to work. It's right in there. And so, but then it's figuring out exactly how much work you would like to do. And just like how we saw in the parable of the talents, and it talks about, God gave one person 5, and then they worked and got another 5, gave one 10, and they worked and got another 10. And then he gave them 1, and then they just buried it and did nothing with it. And so, what has God called you to do with what he has given you there? And only you can answer that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just speaking from a personal perspective. Like, I've definitely had unhealthy ambition drive me. And in a lot of ways, in the society that we live in, it's rewarded, right? Like the more ambitious you are, the more, go-getter you are, it does get rewarded. The question is how tired are you with your time in the process, or how burnt out do you get, or how much do you feel like everything that you've succeeded is your responsibility to uphold, right? And I think when you're doing it God's way, the weight on your shoulders is much less, because it's not your responsibility to sustain it. It's your responsibility to steward it. And that's different. And God understands timing and what exactly you're gifted and purposed at, and how to provide that for you to do through you. Right. And I just think even like the early part of my career, I was so desperate to prove myself, and that I wasn't just a jock or just a stupid athlete who went to college and played soccer. And that's how I got my degree while I was there. I was trying to prove myself to myself more than anyone else. And I just God really had to correct me and be like, hey.
So on this topic, I'm going to close this out with a homework assignment to talk about, balancing contentment with striving, and back to the thing that we help clients go through. I would say, why don't you just take some time, write down a list of your meaningful memories? It doesn't have to be a list of 3 or 5 or 10. Just write down as many meaningful memories as you can think of.
Yes.
And, and maybe you have to do it over the course of a couple of days, but just sit down. Like, what is a meaningful memory to me? Write down as many as you could think of and see what the themes are connected to in your personality. Because when our time is close to being end on this world, we're going to be, it's really the meaningful memories that are going to make us the happiest.
Yeah.
The things that we could think back to and reflect on. Not, and each person has their own meaningful memory. So I don't want to try to influence you with what mine might be versus what yours are. So come up with your meaningful memories, and then that will help you figure out how to strike your balance between striving and contentment. How are you creating those meaningful memories? Even when you think about 2025, the rest of this year, we're going to be starting October next week. How many more meaningful memories are you going to be able to create in the last quarter of this year, in the last 90 days of it? How many can you create in the next 7 days, in the next week? And so think about, meaningful memories, what's important to you. Have a beautiful Sunday.